Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. As I was saying, the topic for our next panel is very exciting. It indeed is. What lies ahead for Indian capital markets and the economy over the next 3 years? And we have, ladies and gentlemen, a very esteemed panel. Let me invite and introduce our panelists. We have with us Mr. Sunil Singhania, the founder of Abacus Asset Management, an India-focused asset management company, which was founded in 2018. He comes armed with over 2 decades of experience in Indian equity. As ex-CIO at Reliance Mutual Fund, he oversaw around $11 million of equity assets. Mr. Singhania was the first mutual fund manager in India whose fund NAV touched rupees 1,000 and delivered 100x return since inception. Mr. Singhania is the head of various associations, including the chairmanship of CFA Investment Committee. A very warm welcome to you, sir. Mr. Sunil Singhania is here with us. Let me now introduce you to our next panelist, Mr. Prashant Khemka, the founder and CIO of White Oak Capital Management. Now, prior to setting up White Oak Capital Management in June 2017, he spent 17 years at Goldman Sachs Asset Management and also for the global emerging markets. He has won several accolades as the CIO and lead PM of GS India Equity. Mr. Khemka and his fund has won several awards, including AAA rating from CityWire and elite rating from Fund Caliber, among others. In addition to his long-standing India investing experience, he brings a unique perspective derived across developed and emerging market equities and has successfully managed US and global emerging market funds for leading institutions during the last 2 decades. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Khemka. We have with us Mr. Sameer Arora, who is the main founder and fund manager at Helios Capital. From 1998 to 2003, he was the head of Asian emerging markets at Alliance Capital Management in Singapore. In 2002, he was voted as the most astute equity investor in Singapore in a poll conducted by the Asset Magazine. More recently, Helios Strategic Fund has been nominated for the Best India Fund by Eureka Hedge 10 times and has won the award 4 times. Helios Strategic Fund has also received the Asia Hedge Award 2018 for its long-term performance. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Arora. Now, ladies and gentlemen, after having introduced our esteemed panelists, let me now introduce the moderator for this session, and that is none other than Mr. Kamal Manocha. Mr. Kamal Manocha, the man behind the scene, is the founder and CEO of PMS AIF World. Now, he is an enthusiastic person with the purpose of serving clients with the most knowledgeable approach to investing. He's an honors in economics and holds an MBA in finance. And ladies and gentlemen, he's here with us. He carries with him many investment certifications and holds vast experience of more than 16 years in the field of investments and advisory. What a pleasure it is for Mr. Kamal Manocha to be hosting this with such esteemed panel. Mr. Manocha, we are very excited, and I'm going to hand over the proceedings to you now. Take it away, sir.
Thank you, Aishwarya. What a wonderful beginning. And welcome, to the eminent panelists. It is, my pleasure to be doing this panel discussion. And let me, introduce from my side for the, better understanding of the audience that we have, such speakers who come with more than, 2 decades of experience in terms of, managing, working in the capital markets. Sameer Arora particularly comes with 3 decades of experience. Sunil Singhania and Prashant Khemka come with more than 2 decades of experience, more than 2.5 decades of experience to be precise. And, to give a context to their different styles of management, I'll spend 1 more minute. Mr. Sunil Singhania follows, investing in value businesses with growth trend. Mr. Prashant Khemka follows investing in quality and growth businesses at reasonable price. And, Mr. Sameer Arora says that there is no need to follow a particular style, because styles and trends remain for 3 to 5 years. It is good to have do's and don'ts and do a bottom-up research. So this is how three thought leaders in this industry have been making money for themselves and for their clients for many years. To our panelists, I would like to give a quick context of this entire event that we are doing and the discussion that we're going to do. So over last 1 year, we have seen equity markets again coming back and showing that equity is the best asset class when it comes to returns. But what happens, investors always see equity with first risk and then returns. Whenever we think of equity, the first thought that comes to our mind is risk. Whether it was a month of March, April, May last year, we were thinking about risk. Whether it is now, we are still thinking of risk. The reasons are different, but our first focus is always risk. we have discussed with various fund managers yesterday and over a period of time, and it has been understood well by investors in India. I can tell you that one should focus on good businesses, because if you focus on good businesses, then risk is implicit and risk can be accepted. So investing in right businesses and good businesses is something which is a valid point which many understand. But the more difficult point, which many again say that it is actually irrelevant, but still which crowds people with a lot of risk oriented thoughts, is macro factors. Where is economy headed? Where is India's economy headed versus US economy? What is the capital market future over next 3 years in terms of various risks like interest rates, inflation, currency risk, and all. So this particular session, we are going to discuss about the future of India's capital market and economy over next 3 years in terms of understanding these macro risks. And the fact is that, why we want to do this, because we believe that we as advisors need to comprehend risk, but not focus too much on risk. Once risk is comprehended, one should ideally focus on returns, because that is the core aspect to create wealth. There are immense opportunities to create wealth if one focuses on returns and not focuses on risk. So we will, comprehend risk, but focus on returns. And that is how, we can maybe select good businesses. So first, my first question to Prashant. Prashant, you have been managing money as a global fund manager, and now you have been managing money in India. So what I see, when we meet a lot of our MSME oriented clients and promoters, they say that over the last 1 year, we have seen a time where many of the commercial buildings were under lockdown. There was no business activity, right? A lot of promoters feel that the activity in terms of businesses is absolutely very mild. But at the same time, markets have actually come up to their all-time highs, and in fact, they have surpassed the all-time highs by 25%. So there is a huge divergence, in versus reality versus where markets are, and investors feel this is the risk number one, that there is this divergence. Markets have ballooned because of too much liquidity, and a little pin of a maybe negative news could kind of lead to the bursting of this balloon. So how would you address this risk? Is this a real risk, or this is a perceptual risk?
Certainly. No, thank you, Kamal, and thank you all for joining today. Great pleasure to be on the panel with my friends Samir and Sunil as well. So thank you, Kamal, for bringing us together. Kamal, you also answered the question just a minute or two ago that all this macro and all talk is irrelevant, right? So I just want to re-emphasize, and if there was one lesson to be drawn from the year 2020, COVID year, was that macro is irrelevant. Okay, so while we will end up discussing the rest of this session about macro, it is irrelevant at the end of the day, but more from an entertainment perspective, let us discuss nonetheless, as we do all the time. So now coming to your question, there are two parts to your question. One is this apparent divergence between what is happening in the economy over the last 12 months and what the markets are doing. That is one part. And second part is, you mentioned about the valuations being what they are because of abundant liquidity. So I'll address the two in distinct parts. First is the divergence between reality and the market. To me, there is no divergence whatsoever. The market has behaved over the last 15 months in perfectly logical manner. If you agree, what I think any investor would fundamentally agree is that market is nothing but the present value of future cash flows. And just like value of any project or value of any company is the present value of future cash flows into perpetuity, not just next year's cash flows, but into perpetuity, many years to come. And hence it follows then the market at the aggregate level, if you take BSE 500, is the present value of all cash flows for those 500 companies into perpetuity. Any 1 year's cash flow is very tiny component of the value of that company. So today, forget about the PE multiple, but on cash flow basis, the market is trading at 40 times next year's free cash flow. And it tends to trade around that level, not only in India, but around the world, in China, US, elsewhere as well, tends to trade around mid 30s, 40s, and so on. So what it means, 40 times free cash flow means this year's cash flow is worth only 2.5% of the value of the company, 1/40th, right? Even if today's cash flow is chopped in half for the companies, that is 1.25 percentage points loss of value of the overall company. The time value in a year itself is, we believe, 11% for Indian companies. So 1.25% is de minimis, even if those cash flows were chopped in half, as long as we believe the future cash flows are not affected, or the present value of future cash flows are not affected. So it's a combination of cash flows and the discount rate used to discount those cash flows. So if you look at last year, the markets fell precipitously in March, because if you put yourselves back in what was happening in March, the only data coming was out of China, which was very scary and undependable. Mortality rate was feared to be 5% or so. China had completely locked up Wuhan for days and weeks, and still the infection was spreading across. So this, and then countries were announcing, including India, had announced lockdowns, right? Complete lockdowns. It was unclear at that time that a vaccine would ever be developed. Even if it's developed, normally it takes 10 years to develop. Medication may never be developed, as one has never been developed for cold, common cold, and so. That being the case, and mortality rate feared to be 5% or so, nobody would dare to come outside of their houses. And if everyone stays locked up for years or many months, then a lot of businesses would go bankrupt. The travel and tourism would go bankrupt, energy companies, transportation companies would go bankrupt, and hence banks would start going bankrupt, which would be worse than the Lehman crisis. And that's why the banks fell, the markets fell precipitously globally. But within days, the real information, the reality started to emerge, that it is not as deadly a virus. It is infectious, highly infectious, but mortality rate is not 5%. It may be 0.1 to 0.2%. And then there were companies like Pfizer, Sanofi, Astra, who were putting in billions of dollars at work, and their CEOs were coming on national channels and saying we would have a vaccine ready within a year, while there was no guarantee. Market is a probabilistic mechanism. So soon, within matter of days, it started to emerge that the virus is not so deadly and vaccine could be possible. If virus is not so deadly, that means lockdowns would not stay. If the chances of dying is 1 in 1,000 worldwide, the economy would not stop. And hence markets started rallying, and it continued to rally as the vaccine development progressed. The markets don't have to wait till a vaccine is announced and people get vaccinated. The markets would rally if preclinical trials in some animals would show some degree of effectiveness. The markets would rally, because markets are a probabilistic mechanism, and hence markets have fully recovered. The second wave, people are shocked that so many, remember, markets bottomed on March 23rd, 2020, when there were single digit deaths that day. In fact, cumulatively, there were single digit deaths, not that day. Total number of cases were still in hundreds, cumulatively 500 or so, and that day the cases were 75, and markets bottomed then, despite later on, particularly in second wave, lakhs of people dying and getting infected in a day, and tens of thousands dying. The markets didn't budge, because markets not worried about people dying. What markets realized was, with or without second wave, once the vaccines are effective against any of these variants, there aren't going to be indefinite lockdowns, and hence there aren't going to be many bankruptcies or any bankruptcies, and hence the present value of future cash flows is not impacted negatively in any material manner. And maybe what we are not realizing, but market is, that the advancement in technology that the pandemic has unleashed globally, including all of us getting together here. Remember, Kamal, before, setting up a video conference call required a lot of elaborate arrangement and testing ahead of the actual. And this is one-on-one. If Samir and I or Sunil and I are going to set up a video conference call, our tech team would test the previous day that it is working properly now, yeah, with clients and all. Today, you get on a Zoom call on the fly. These are all productivity enhancing developments. And because of pandemic, I think a lot of these productivity enhancing technological developments have been accelerated what was to happen in decade in many of these areas would happen in a year or two. And that's what maybe the market is telling us. And hence market's doing a lot better because productivity, which ties in with growth, could be superior going forward, while it may seem like doomsday today. So that's on the divergence. I see no divergence there. And secondly, quickly, I think for 13 years, the macro, so-called macro gurus and doomsayers have been wrong. Since the day after Lehman crisis, they've been crying hoarse that markets are ahead of themselves and they should fall, they should fall. And markets globally have been one way, going upwards. They have no face-saving argument to make. There is too much ego and arrogance in our industry to accept and confess, except for a few, that we have been wrong in saying the markets are ahead of themselves. So whom do they blame? They blame the central bankers, that we are fundamentally right, but actually it's the central bankers who have rigged the system, and hence the markets are where they are. Otherwise, we are not wrong. Our assessment was always right. To us, I believe there is a perfect logical reason to what the markets are doing. Is that if interest rates are low, 40-year lows, 50-year lows, or 100 years low, multiples have to be higher. You can't expect multiple to be the same when 10-year bond in US is 1.3%. as the multiple was when the 10-year bond rate was 7%, which is what it was when I was studying there in the mid 90s, right? So interest rates are lower, not because Fed is pumping money, because inflation expectations are dead or near dead. And I'm talking about long-term inflation expectations, not this year or next year. And inflation expectations are dead, in my view, because of the technological evolutions over the last over the last 4 decades, all the advances since 80s, with the advent of personal computer, internet, and mobility, all combined together means we have this supercomputer we all carry in our pockets, and we are all connected with each other anywhere in the world. And that's unleashed tremendous productivity in every sphere of life. And productivity enhancement at this rapid pace is deflationary. It's deflationary from a commodities perspective, as well as deflationary for wage pressures. And those are the two key legs of inflation expectations, and both are broken. So unless inflation expectations were to rise, which currently seem hard to see, and these are expectations, not next year's inflation. Again, the long-term inflation expectations, if they rise, then there is risk to long-term interest rates, and then there's risk to multiples, which may happen. All I'm saying is that I'm not in agreement with those who say it's the liquidity pumped by Fed that is driving interest rates lower and multiples higher. So Kamal, those...
Fair point, Prashant. I take that and move to now Sunil. Sunil, though Prashant has addressed the first risk and he has kind of shunned that risk by saying it is just a perception, but markets have behaved very logically. Now, at the same time, I read, a lot of articles and a lot of eminent, I would say, people in the industry also quote, Buffett's formula or to understand the valuations of markets, which is market cap to GDP ratio. And it is kind of, seen as a risk number 2, where it is quoted that, this ratio has, moved to more than 100, it is already 105, unless and until, the denominator, which is GDP, actually moves up, which as of now, looks to be negative in terms of trailing numbers, right? This ratio is already at a very high level, and hence there is no room for actually equity markets to rise further on logical reasons. How do you, what is your viewpoint in this regards? And also, if you agree with what Prashant has mentioned, I would like to understand from you.
Thanks a lot, Kamal, for having me. Nice to, as Prashant said, nice to connect with friends, Samir Bhai and Prashant, and thanks all the viewers for logging in. See, I think one disclaimer is that, I have been optimist on India for the last 25 years. I'm very sure as has been Prashant and Samir Bhai, and to that extent, whatever I say should be taken with bias in mind. I continue to be very optimistic from a 10, 20 years perspective going forward also. In terms of your question on the market cap to GDP, yes, there would be a lot of factors which keep on being highlighted from time to time. And every factor is relevant or irrelevant depending on how you interpret it. Whether a P is 5 or 50 or 100, keeps on varying from time to time. We are now having IPOs which are trading at multiple PE multiples. So by that logic, no IPO should be even subscribed. But coming to your question about market cap to GDP, yes, it gives a good indication in terms of what is happening. But to begin with, I would agree with the Prashant's view that in a falling interest rate environment or in a low interest rate environment, all these traditional matrices have to be rebalanced upwards. And I would say market cap to GDP would also be in that scheme of things. The other thing is, we are also in a world where incremental savings are going higher and higher. And in that respect, market cap is a cumulative, I would say, pool of money which has been invested, and GDP is for that particular year. So I think to that extent, one has to realize that the pool of wealth or the pool of savings will keep on increasing, and this GDP is only one that particular year. The third thing is that you are right. Last 3-4 years, GDP growth has been muted, and to that extent, the denominator is not a fair assessment of what is actually happening. See, equity investment is all about investing for the future. And our view at least is that there is a strong probability of our nominal GDP growing back to the double-digit levels, whether it is 10 or 11 or 12% will depend on how bullish or bearish you are. But there is no doubt that we are heading back to a nominal GDP growth of upwards of double-digit. And to that extent, I think that is clearly visible. The other important thing is that, on a purchasing power basis, our GDP is significantly underreported by the figures which have been put forward. And I think, again, that would be something which we have to look at. The fourth thing which might be reinforcing your thing is that there are so many unlisted companies. If you actually start to add that, then maybe the market cap to GDP would be upwards of 200%. So I think what I'm just trying to say is that in isolation, any one factor can lead to you making decisions which are not rational. Coming to the overall perspective, there is no doubt that the profit as a percentage of GDP has been among the lowest we have seen over the last 3-4 years since we started tracking that. And I think that is what we have to see. If the profit pool starts to inch up, which we have already seen despite a pandemic year, and our view is that we can go back to that 6-7% profit as a percentage of market cap coming back, which would give us a PE inverse of around 16 times. I think we are still in a very healthy kind of a scenario, notwithstanding the fact that we are in a dynamic world, we are in a volatile world, we are in a world where news flow is very seamless, transmitted at the same time to everyone, and we want to react at the same time in the same direction. Our view would be that yes, take into account the market cap to GDP, but that is not the end of the world. And I would again highlight that take it as one of the factors, not the only factor.
Right, Sunil, well said. So, we have addressed two risks that investors have in their mind, right? One is the divergence, and second is the, valuations in terms of difference in market cap versus GDP value. Samir, my question to you on risk number 3. Again, I will also give this disclaimer that I am also perennial bull. I also, keep my asset allocation skewed towards equity, but I have been given this panel to moderate about the risks, and risks are always most about macros, which we rightly said that could be irrelevant, but we have to understand them, comprehend them. So coming to you, Samir, the third risk, which is again, in investors' mind, is that whenever market sentiments are very euphoric, this is kind of very risky, right? So I'll tell you one data point. Last year in March, April, May, we had done one poll amongst our clients, and it was understood that most of the investors, most of the clients had answered that there were only 3% investors who were at that point of time bullish, who were wanting to invest. All other 97% investors were kind of worried of entering into equity markets. And I remember seeing you also on TV at that point of time. Your stance was also very cautious at that point of time. right? I do not know, after when you changed your stance and what is your stance now. But the point is, today when we run that poll, it is opposite. It is around 85% people say that they are bullish. So it seems to me that sentiments have become so positive that, again, it looks like whenever it is said that when you see that stocks doubling, tripling in 3 weeks to 4 weeks, it is a time when one has to be very, very cautious. Like, Warren Buffett says, be fearful when everybody else is greedy, right? So this is the risk number 3, which is the perception, right? How do you address this risk, and what is your stance in the current context?
Thank you very much. So before I answer that question, hi everybody, I will answer the previous questions because I have a different view.
Also, Sameer, also some comments on what Warren Buffett says and your views on this thing would be very helpful.
I will. Now you've excited me. But before that, the market has gone up. If you look at it over 1 year rolling period, let's look at it in calendar years. So the market in 2020 was up some 17-18%. If I look at MSCI India, in 2019 it was up like 10%. In 2018 it was down. 2017 it was up some 35-40%, but 2016 it was flat. 2015 it was down. This is very different from previous bull markets like 2007 and 2007 the market was up some 80%. In 2006 it was up some 50%. 2005 up 50%. So this is very different. It looks optically, first of all, are asking is because their business is doing badly. It is. And those stocks are not going up. The stocks that are facing those kind of issues are not going up. So the market is quite efficient also in some sense that the stocks that are going up are the tech stocks or pharma stocks or some digital type stocks or whatever stocks who are also benefiting from this issue. So first of all, looking at it right from a bottom, which in hindsight looks unjustified because of fears that did not come through. That means the market overreacted on the downside and then has reacted on the other side. And therefore, the big picture is that if you look at 10 years data, 20 years data, 100 years data, the markets in the world go up 6-7% or 6% more than interest rates of that market, or the long bond interest of the market. In India, if you look at GDP in nominal terms or these interest rate, you are supposed to make 13-15%. And you actually haven't made much more than that at an index level in the last many years. So I don't think the market that way seems to be in a place where you can say that you will lose significant amount of money. It may correct a little bit. So when you say today that the retail sentiment is high and that is a negative, I totally agree with that. But I don't think that is enough to bring the market down 20-30%. But clearly there will be a jolt because it is looking, because, in the past I used to say that the two, I can give their name, doesn't matter. But in the previous bull runs, I used to say that Enam and Kotak bring down our market every time because they used to have these IPOs of, crappy stocks. And those IPOs would get oversubscribed hundreds of times in the 90s. And then now these stocks may or may not be crappy, but 100 times still looks a bit wild. And as one of the signals, yes, it is a risk, but I don't think this risk is anything more than saying, okay, the market might correct 4-5% 1 month because there'll be either a disappointment on some IPO or some event in the world. But in the past, the market has not gone up a lot. In the last 4-5 years, I mean, for it to feel that you're coming at an absolutely ridiculous starting point. The other thing is markets are supposed to be, in theory, at all-time high all the time because every year they are growing their earnings. And if it was like a bond or like debt, it is supposed to be at all-time high every time. It is that it is volatile and this time happens to be high, but that is nothing odd in it. It would be odd if it was ridiculously high. And then we will not agree that macro does not matter because if the market itself is up obscenely in the last 3-4 years, unrelated to the earnings of that period, then you may say that there will be a correction back to a normalized level and all that. But as I said today, the beneficiaries are winning and people who are hurt, those stocks are also not going up. It is not so And another thing is that the companies that are doing well because they are in the formal sector, they are the organized guys, and they are benefiting at the expense of the poor MSME guys at this time, because the MSME guys have been hurt because of DeMon and then GST and then RERA and then financing issues because of NBFCs, etc. So it is true. Nobody grows in a vacuum. You are growing at the expense of somebody or some other sector or some other this thing if you're growing disproportionately. And actually, both these things can be consistent, that the MSMEs are not doing well, but the organized guys are doing well, even in a sort of a zero-sum game. And then the pie itself is growing at some percent. But I won't say that retail investors being 100% bullish in their sentiment and coming up 100 times in the IPO is not a marginal negative. It is.
Right, Sameer. So, so you have a different opinion, which is good, right? And at the same time,
not very different. Just saying, look at it like that. You don't have to overly defend it. It is okay. It's not.
You have a balanced opinion, right? So that's good point. Prashant, coming back to you now, we have understood from you that you do not see too much divergence, and Sunil conquers your view. You support your view, with lower interest rates. And Sunil, conquers your view by quoting that markets work on forward thinking and expectations of future in terms of, expected earnings is definitely there. And, Sameer at the same time tries to balance between both of you. So, which is, taking us to some understanding. But we have more or less understood, three big risks that are there in investors' mind. I now want you to highlight what are the areas to make money over next 3 years in terms of sectors. So I will give you a context, of how I'm wanting you to, address this. Over last 20 years, we have seen, two sectors which have actually maintained their weights. One is auto sector and second is IT sector, which have kind of more or less maintained their weights. But there have been sectors which have increased their weights tremendously, like, financial services, NBFCs, consumption businesses. And there have been sectors which have decreased their weights. All of us understand, the manufacturing side, the infra side, the cement side. So over next 3 years, when we are seeing now, again, maybe growth coming back, interest rates low, right? So what are the sectors, which will participate most? And what are your views particularly to auto and IT sector?
Certainly. No, thanks, Kamal. And pleasure to hear Sunil and Sameer's views as well. See, first the caveat once again that our team does not try ever to decide which sectors we want to invest, which sectors would do well and what not. The team does have higher allocations to certain sectors than other sectors. In fact, has zero allocations to some of the sectors. But those are outcome, those allocations are outcome of what they are able to find as most attractive opportunities. Sometimes it may happen that the team has significant allocation which otherwise seem like a poor sector. But even in a poor sector, you might be able to identify some great company-specific opportunities which could deliver fantastic returns. And at other times, like in 2003 to 2007 timeframe, if I were to take an example, infrastructure or let's say road construction was supposed to be such a big deal because India was getting, highways across the length and breadth of the country, but there was no really good road builder that made any money. So sometimes good sectors may not have what might appear as high growth, good sectors may not have good investment opportunities. So with those caveats aside, where the team is currently finding a lot of opportunities, exciting opportunities, and hence has higher allocations would be, one is IT services, particularly in mid-cap IT services. I think the IT services segment, at least till very recently, was quite highly neglected sector because there is a general misconception or myth that IT sector, amongst some section of fund managers and investors, that IT sector is an ex-growth sector or a mature sector. Because the reason is because companies in IT sector speak in terms of dollar term growth. NESCOM the industry body also speaks in terms of 7 to 8% dollar term growth. Just yesterday, TCS had announced the results day before yesterday, and one of the analysts mentioned, was this quarter's growth. We, by the way, don't own TCS, and I'm not, we can't discuss any company specific issue, just from a regulatory perspective, but just I'm highlighting a point where an analyst on the call said, with the pace you're growing, you'll just revert back to your old pre-pandemic 8-9% growth, which is nothing exciting post-pandemic, right? Now that 8-9% growth sounds low because it is dollar terms and spoken in dollar terms. $8-9 term translates to, because a rupee over time devalues by 4 to 5%. 8-9% growth would translate to 12 to 14% growth in rupee terms. As soon as you start thinking of it in rupee terms, 12 to 14%, that's very solid growth. How many other sectors in India or the largest company in those sectors can be expected to deliver 12 to 14% growth? And this is true at the industry level. Some of the mid-cap companies, on the back of strong execution and the area and the business mix, they are able to grow at high teens to even 20+% growth. And our team continues to find some very well managed such companies that are very attractively valued relative to the peers in the industry and relative to other companies in the market overall. So that's one area. Second, I would highlight is obviously, now this happens to be a sector that of late has been in great fancy. And when I say off late, it's been 3 to 5 years that it's been fancy, is in specialty chemicals or chemicals in general, if I would say. And I would like to think of it as more of a continuum, chemicals and pharmaceuticals, okay? Because chemicals and pharmaceuticals basically are chemicals that are consumed by human beings, whereas chemicals could be considered as chemicals consumed by in other activities, or as intermediates, or in APIs, or in agrochemicals, and so on and so forth. So there the team has long had great success and continues to find great many attractive opportunities. And third, I would like to highlight, as has been consistent for a very long time, the team continues to find great opportunities in private sector financials. So financials, but not necessarily PSU financials, but particularly well run, well managed, strong liability franchise, clean asset books. Those kind of companies are still quite a lot to be owned at attractive valuations in the financial sector space. So to highlight just three, and then there are a lot of individual miscellaneous companies which cannot so easily be classified into a particular sector. Those also make up a good chunk of the portfolio.
Right, Prashant. Moving on to Sunil. Sunil, we have a lot of clients who are invested in Abacus, and Abacus is one of the products which has actually delivered the best returns over the last 1.5 years. A lot of investors have actually doubled. Many of them are close to kind of tripling their values. And today, when I talk to all those clients, they want me to ask this question from you. Does it scare you, because all these investors, are invested, some of them cannot even exit at this moment because they are invested in closed-ended products, right? But, they want to hear it from you that, at this point of time, what is your sentiment, in terms of further 3 years? You have mentioned that equity markets are projecting future growth. So, taking cues from Prashant, from Samir, how would you like to answer to such investors?
First of all, thanks to you and all the investors who have reposed their faith on our team and Abacus. Really grateful. See, I think again, returns in a fund are an outcome of first the underlying. I would say no portfolio manager or no fund house will be able to give you returns unless there is strength in the economy and strength in the markets. So first of all, I would say I'll attribute a lot of these returns to what has happened in the markets. Obviously, some of the stocks which the team has collectively bought have done very, very well, and I think hats off to them. Coming to the investors, I think if the investors are investors, I'm very sure they should not be looking at the 6-month, 1 year or 2 year returns. If they call themselves investors, then they have invested from a 5-7 years perspective, and I think that is what we always communicate when we even meet them. Coming again to the future outlook, as I said, with a little bit of bias that, I've been positive last 25 years, and it has helped me professionally and personally. And it has helped our investors also personally and professionally and financially. Because, in a growing economy where profit growth is, visible, returns will always be made, because equity is an asset class, which is a growing asset class. So I think what we are very confident is that the underlying portfolios which we have in our funds have earnings growth of upwards of 15%. And I think as long as that is there, irrespective of the volatility, in 5 years' time, you will have profits of the underlying portfolio doubling from where it is today. And, as you rightly said when you introduced, me, I think we are a little bit value conscious. Obviously, without growth, there is no return to be made. So if you just buy a value stock without profit growth, you will end up just holding on to that stock, explaining to all your friends, and no one would buy it. But if you have a stock which is decently valued, and when there is profit growth, it's a matter of time before it will be recognized. And I think that is where I can just say that the portfolios are ably invested. The last bit is, we are in a phase where a lot of things have converged together. Yes, the pandemic is still not out. We are still, obviously having numbers which keep on going up, going down, concerns which keep on coming. Now UK is again back to 30,000. South Korea is having added cases. There is some curfew in Tokyo, and so on and so forth. So these news flows will keep on happening. But as Prashant said earlier, the reality is that there is a vaccine. Now the vaccine is 75% efficacy or 90% efficacy. The fact of the matter is that anyway, the serious patients were very small. And on top of it, when you have the vaccine, that percentage keeps on going down. So despite this concern, you have a confluence of positives, which is easy liquidity, alternatives being very less attractive, profit growth, which was absent, coming back. In fact, March 21, Nifty had a profit growth of 15%, which was the highest in the last 5 years. You imagine, it is so ironic that in a year where the country was locked down for 2 months completely, and for the balance 10 months on and off being locked down, and earnings, analysts projecting earnings to degrow by 35%, we ended the year with a 15% earnings growth. And if things go the way it is looking like, despite the partial lockdown again, this first quarter, you are looking at earnings growth of 35-40% for this year. I think we have a good tailwind. On top of it, I think Indian government has woken up with this COVID. We are in the midst of quite a few interesting developments. We are now talking about privatization, not divestment. We are talking about, supporting the Indian manufacturing industry through PLI schemes and some protection from duties. Exports are booming. This China plus one, whatever we say, is positively impacting some sectors as far as India is concerned, which will include chemicals and engineering and even traditional sectors like textiles. And I think all in all, we are not in a euphoric zone. 19 times FY23 is slightly higher than the long-term average, but it's not like crazy 70, 80 times. Yes, you highlighted a few red flags, which is massive oversubscription to IPOs, retail, interest being very high. But on the other hand, when we meet large family offices, I have never seen such underinvestment in equities ever. And I have never seen people waiting for a market correction the way they are waiting. Everyone is waiting for the markets to drop 10-15% so they can invest. When so many people are waiting for markets to correct, they will never correct. So I think all said and done, if the investors are investors, they should not be worrying about what has happened in the last 6 months. They should be worried about what is going to happen in the next 3-4 years. And there we have a very positive sort of an outlook.
Sure. So moving ahead to Sameer. Sameer, I want to understand from you, one of your product decks I had read once, and I remember that it says that, in your do's and don'ts, in don'ts it is mentioned that you do not invest into commodity prices driven businesses, into state owned businesses. So these 2 points are well understood. But there is a third point which is mentioned there, that you do not believe in, 1 billion consumer stories. Though, last 10 years have actually shown consumption as one of the biggest sectors in terms of earnings, in terms of growth in prices. And since we are discussing sectoral view, what are your views in this regards? And over to you.
So consumer is one of our favorite sectors, but I was talking about 1 billion consumer stories versus a 300 million consumer stories. So we say we want urban under penetration, not India under penetration, because the story is that everything, if you divide and think that the market is 1.3 billion people, then everything looks under penetrated and wow. Whereas we are not promoters but investors, so we can choose what we want, and we want something which we can in our mind feel is under penetrated in middle class India or urban India or basically the 300 million India. So let me give you one example of that. So I bought Bharti in 2002, and in those days the total population, total users of telecom or whatever mobile was some 5 million. And at that time, China had some 150 million users. And the theory and the story from the management, say, for example, was that, even in 20 years, if you become like China today, we'll have a great growth. And secondly, India has about 100 million two-wheeler and four-wheeler EMI guys, and therefore 5 million can go to 100 million. So we kept that stock, and then we bought it in Helios, and then came 2010, and I went to these guys and said, now what? They had, I think, 300 million at that time, and total India, at least SIMs were like 500 million or something, or 600. They said India has 1.3 billion people. So we sold the stock broadly in that week, and for 9 years never went back, because we are not interested. We can choose what we like. Consumer obviously is one of the best wealth creators, and mostly we've had all of them. And also my other theory is that if you look at the Forbes billionaires list, where do they come from? Because those are the long-term wealth creators. They come from finance, consumer, pharma, tech. They very rarely come from commodities and other things. And so whatever Prashant was saying, those sectors we also like. And consumer we like, but we don't like if the company is presenting it as now suddenly going to 1.3 billion people. It also happened in many other examples, but I don't want to publicly. I am not like these fund managers who sell a stock and then write how they will never like it because next time the management won't meet you.
Sure. So we have one last round of discussions. We have 7 minutes to go. So short answers. Over to you, Prashant. I would like to understand from you. You had highlighted in your point on my first question that market is sum total of discounting future earnings. And now future earnings, when discounted, inflation also plays a big role because inflation eats this discounting of future earnings. How big is this risk? And do you see inflation as one of the big risks which will lead to maybe next correction?
So just minor, more of semantic, but important to highlight future cash flows, because cash flows can at times, near term at least, can be very different from earnings, and obviously earnings are always higher than cash flows. So that minor clarification aside, your question was regarding the risk of inflation and hence the impact on discount rates. Yes, so that is certainly one of the key risks to equity market valuations worldwide. But importantly, when we think of inflation, what is material, what is relevant is not what is current day inflation is or what next year's inflation is. So just because some agro prices have gone up, ag commodities and metals have gone up, inflation might rise, but that does not mean inflation expectations have risen. When it comes to interest rates, what matters really is inflation expectations, which are inflation expectations are for long term, 10-year, 20-year, 30-year, and so on. It absolutely does not matter what today's inflation is or next year's inflation is, unless you believe that inflation is representative of what the long term would be. And hence, as Fed has been saying, the current inflation is transient in nature. What they're saying, because of supply shocks and all, there are shortages in supply, and hence prices have gone up. and this is near-term inflation. So what you hear in newspaper and media, that inflation is high, inflation is high, inflation is high, that is inflation today, possibly next month, coming year. But that has not impacted, at least so far, longer term inflation expectations. If there was something to change more structurally and fundamentally, which changes inflation expectations longer term, then you would see that impact in the long term bond rates. US 10-year bond rate, US 30-year bond rate move higher. And then that would reflect in the market multiples. To us, there is possible. Look, Japan is negative interest rates, Sweden is negative interest, Switzerland is negative interest rates, Germany is negative interest rates, UK is in half of US, and so on and so forth. So there is merit in the argument that US interest rates might go lower, and US interest rates currently are too high when compared to all these peer group countries than otherwise. I mean, a counter argument, devil's advocate, can be played over there.
Right. Over to you, Sunil. I would want to understand from you. 2 years ago, you had, published this note, Bubble Inequality. And to an extent, that point of time, that note was kind of read by a lot of people. And over the last 2 years, we have seen that the broader markets have actually participated and they have outperformed the quality side of market. But if there was a bubble, and and if we kind of try and understand that bubble from the perspective of valuations, that bubble still remains, and bubble has become, in fact, bigger. So over next 3 years, because of maybe the turnaround of economy, the capex coming back, do you see this bubble actually will get burst at some point of time, or these companies will continue to command price to perfection?
So one is, the intention of writing the report was not to burst anything. The intention of writing the report was to just give our perspective of it. See, there will always be different styles of managers, but at some point of time, we all agree that what we are paying today for a stock has to come back to us in terms of future earnings. That is a simple way of investing. You might give a higher discounting based on your expectation of higher future growth. I think what we were trying to make a point, and I think Prashant mentioned about IT services, and I will just highlight here, if a company is growing at 12% profit for 20 years, and another company is also growing 12% profit for 20 years, one company gets 80p multiple, the other company gets 15p multiple. That is where the opportunity is. I am very happy that this exists, because then you will be able to exploit that opportunity. The other thing is, see, world is flat, and investment over the last 300-400 years across the world will converge. If consumption companies are so great, why do they trade 20p multiples in China or Indonesia or even US with a faster growth? And the same sectors in India with a lower growth will trade at a P multiple of 80, 90 times. I think there's a lot of dumb money in the world. It's passive money. A stock gets, included in MSCI. Suddenly there is a huge, $300, $400, $500 million of buying, and the stock moves up. The funds who have the stock do well, they get more money and they buy the same stocks. So there is a lot of this kind of reasons also which has led to it. I think what will now happen is that I think the biggest threat to these companies will now come from the new listings. So when the Zomatos and the Paytms of the world will get listed, this quality gurus will have some other stocks which are even more valuable. So when I had a colleague who used to always tell me that was Sunil 20p tak hai na tension hai. Uske upar whether it is 30p or 300p doesn't matter. So till the stock is 20p, you talk about p. Once it goes beyond it, then who cares? So I think the view remains the same. If you are able to find a company which is growing at 25-30% year after year, maybe you can justify 70-80p. If a company is growing at 10%, for you to give a 80p means for making 10% return, that company will have to trade at 80p for the rest of its life. And nowhere in the world, in the last 300 years, it has happened that a company has traded a P of 70-80 times for even 10 years, leave alone forever.
Right. Thank you so much, Sunil. Moving on to our last question, and Samir, you have 2 minutes.
No, I want to answer this question only. This was more interesting than anything you can ask. But anyway, you ask a more boring question. If it is boring, I will answer this question.
Sure. So the question is that, in my last conversation with you, you had mentioned that most fund managers in India, talk about rhetorical statements that which is long-term horizon. But you do not believe in long-term horizon. You believe when you buy a stock that you keep an objective horizon of 3 years. At the same time, in your one of the product texts, you have mentioned that you like to invest in India, but not on Indians. So,
Yeah.
what is your view of India?
Okay, I'll answer this. This is more specific. Sorry, Singhania ji, I will support you in another forum.
You can answer both.
Or maybe I can take 3 minutes. So the question is, now the theory of these high valuation companies is that if you buy high valuation companies, a price doesn't matter. So I was thinking that recently, not recently, many years ago, Bill Gates was bidding for these Leonardo da Vinci document. And another guy was also a billionaire. Both these guys were worth 80, 100 billion or whatever they were worth. But still they stopped at 23 million and one guy said, I don't want it. These things were being bought for love. Here we are trying to buy for returns, and to even say publicly that price doesn't matter of what I buy. I mean, people who are buying pink diamonds for their daughters and wives, they also stop at some time and say no more, even though there is no real underlying value. So that is easy. Now coming to us. No, you are not understanding my deck. Maybe I have to be clear. I say we bet on India, not on Indians. What that means is we don't want an Indian company to be very multinational. For example, we would not buy a Tata Motor because it is not a play on India. It is a play on the world. You have to worry about market in China and competition from German companies and green policies being made in some godforsaken place. But it happens to be listed in India. The other companies we don't like are where they go out and buy low P assets in Egypt and Africa and Australia, where you know that these guys have just bought a business there at 6p in front of you. But because in India, we like to pay 40p for every company, therefore, it's a P arbitrage. If the whole business is in India, I don't know where it has come from. So I say it's part of life. But if I can see, and another, if your business profits are coming from Morocco or Egypt, should I be giving that multiple to those earnings which are of those markets? That's why we say we want to bet on India, not on Indians in the sense. I mean, because I say everything colorfully, you got confused. What was your other question? Sorry. You had one more question, I think.
No, you have answered, I think, both.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes. So thank you very much to all my three panelists. It has been insightful talking to you. We have had, a great discussion regarding addressing, all the fears, perceptions that investors carry at this point of time. And I want to, conclude this discussion, by saying that focus has to be on returns, especially over the next 3 years, because we are actually, headed for good times. And, markets over the next 3 years should ideally build up from here. And because interest rates are low, expectations of growth to rise are rising. Hence, from here on, it is definitely a beginning. It's not that, one should worry about too much.